So, welcome to our 58th story time for December, and to our rather exuberant pajama party, which we're theming the pajama party after Mardi Gras, which can have a couple of interpretations. In Australia, Mardi Gras has become kind of joined with Pride celebrations. In Sydney, they call their Pride Mardi Gras. But over here, when I looked up Mardi Gras, it is really very much still its own thing, which is like a pre-Lent feasting and festival celebration, but it is still that very over-the-top carnival kind of feeling, with parades and things. So we've got every interpretation. But it was specifically requested that some of our characters go to a pride like Mardi Gras, so they are going to be doing that. So our topic included, from Dad, our newest patron, lack of standardization of sizes in shoes and clothes and so forth. When you bring too much of something along to a party and leave it behind to get rid of it. Beekeeping traditions in the UK, specifically telling the bees. Finding your way on the London Underground. When is it too early to put up your Christmas decorations? A contentious question. Storm damage. And from Tegan, specific characters at a Mardi Gras Pride celebration. Now, this has led to there being quite a lot of characters in this story. So I'm going to do a little rundown of who's who and is going to be in this, just to help you out a little bit. There are a lot of people. So the old lady crew was the first requested lot, and this is Betty and co. So we have Betty, who's very elderly, and she has two friends we usually see, Bryn and Barb. I've actually left Barb out this time because I wanted Bryn and Ella to go to the Pride celebration. So it's Bryn and Ella and Betty tagging along. And then Albie's lot, who are the White Cedar Flat family. There are actually lots of them now because lots of new partners and friends have joined that group. But on this occasion, I've kept Jen and Cassie, because that makes sense for them to go to Pride, Albie tagging along, and Elena going to help out Albie because she doesn't entirely trust him to go off to London and be sensible. Finally, Fraser, owner of Brodric, who is our very well-to-do Scottish chap who plays golf and has a cat who is the heir to a fairly substantial fortune. So a little poem to introduce today is themed around the beekeeping traditions and telling the bees and things. It's called Dance. A dance that tells a story, 1,000 words not needed to have the scent of precious pollen heeded. Lavender light in summer sun, fly here and the sweet spoils will be won. What do they know of us? We cannot help but ponder. Do they know how all else needs their bustling buzz to bear the seed of life to all that grows and feeds and becomes? Tell them how we care. Keep the hum of the hive like a diary of all that matters most. Whisper the woes and wonders of life to the swarm, history's ghost, in the dance steps sweeping all we are and have been into the honeycomb heart for safekeeping. Do we keep them or do they keep us? Perhaps we do not know for sure. Perhaps that's why we need their trust and how they must know things. Old secrets and songs and sadnesses and smiles, gone now from our busy minds, given up to be woven and waltzed into time with the dance of the hive. So our story today is called Everything at Once. Now, I need to say that location referred to as being inherited in this story does exist in real life. However, any resemblance of the characters to real people or animals is purely coincidental. So, everything at once. Fraser stared at the phone in his hand. the echo of the coal still ringing in his ears. "You need Brodric to do what now?" he repeated, though no one was listening on the other end anymore. Beside him, on the neatly cut grass of the golf course, Brodric, who was a large, very furry grey cat, blinked up at his human servant with a suspicious expression. His neat red coat with its Stuart tartan underlayer held steadfast against the breeze that was flicking his long fur back and forth like grass in the dunes. Not that either Fraser or Brodric had ever spent any time in sand dunes to make this comparison. Fraser sighed, running an anxious hand through his red curls, and crouched to look at the cat eye to eye, setting his golf club back in the bag. "Brodric," he began cautiously, "I'm afraid we have to go home. That was James on the phone. It seems that you've come into your inheritance. You're the owner of the Stuart Golf Links and Castle Hotel and all of the estate now, Brodric." Brodric merely continued to eye Fraser suspiciously. His new status did not appear to concern him very much. Fraser, on the other hand, was rapidly coming to terms with a truth he had until now conveniently ignored. Brodric was a cat, and for all it was his name on important papers, cats could not, in truth, manage estates or family reputations. Fraser was about to have to take on all but the title associated with the Stuart fortune, and very little in his years of touring sporting grounds and events had prepared him for such responsibilities. He fixed Brodric with a stern look, or what he hoped was a stern look. Fraser wasn't normally in the habit of being stern. "We must go," he told the cat. "You've got to tell the bees." "Wow," replied Brodric, looking most unimpressed. "I know," Fraser sighed, "but it's very important. According to James, if the new owner of the land is not formally introduced, the bees might leave or stop making honey or even die." Brodric continued looking unconvinced, and then drew his ears back and swatted Fraser on the nose with claws out, leaving a sharp, stinging scratch right on the tip where everyone could see it. "Fat lot of emotional support you are," Fraser snapped, scooping Brodric firmly up by the clip on the back of his harness. Back at the estate, James handed Fraser a very large pile of papers, which Fraser eyed in dismay. Then James pointed Fraser and a squirming Brodric in the direction of the beehives. "What if they swarm?" Fraser asked nervously. "Shouldn't we put on those suits you wear?" James disappeared and returned with a beekeeper's suit for himself and Fraser, and modified pram with a mesh visor for Brodric to sit in. After persuading the cat to go into this contraption, a further scratched Fraser followed James towards the hives. "You have terrible manners today, Brodric," he declared crossly. James came to a stop between two hives that looked like stacked colourful boxes on legs. A few of the residents were zooming in and out, and Fraser could hear the low buzzing hum of many more. "You should knock on the top of each hive and explain that Charlie's passed on, but we want them to stay," James instructed, referring to some kind of notebook. "Then you must introduce Brodric." Fraser eyed the buzzing boxes. "Don't you normally deal with the bees?" "Not really, sir. Charlie rather liked doing the beekeeping." "I can't imagine Brodric is going to..." James cleared his throat loudly. "Best not to say so in front of them, sir." He leaned in conspiratorially. "I'm afraid you'll have to learn." Fraser sighed and took a deep breath. Bees. Fraser here. I suppose you might not remember me, but I'm not important, although I probably will be looking after you." He glanced at James for help. but James was studiously checking Brodric's pram enclosure and didn't look back at him. I've come to let you know that sadly, mad great Uncle Charlie, who you normally deal with, has passed on. But we hope you'll stick around. Brodric here will be your master if you'll have him, and I'll be doing my best to look after you for him. Brodric, from inside his bee-proof pram, gave a disgruntled yowl. Fraser looked around nervously. Will they come out of the hives? James inclined his head politely. I don't think so, sir. He held out some black silk ribbon. It's traditional to put mourning ribbons on the hives now. Fraser took the proffered shiny fabric and edged his way over to the nearest bee-filled box. Back inside the house, James took Brodric away for grooming and photographs, and to Fraser's great annoyance was not swiped or bitten for this. Fraser was left looking at the very large stack of documents. There seemed to be a lot of numbers, very few of which added up. Fraser got his phone out of the pocket of his golfing trousers and dialed one of two people in the world whom he trusted, a fellow Doctor Who fan named Elena, who lived in Australia. Elena, he announced as soon as she answered, I need your help working out what the doctor would do. Elena answered by huffing and puffing a bit. What have you got into now? She demanded. Have you been conned? I've seen you with door-to-door salespeople. Brodric has inherited. I'm surrounded by incomprehensible accounts and records previously presided over by a man who made a cat his heir. As thrilling as solving your paperwork problem sounds, Fraser, Elena sighed, I'm currently faced with a great challenge myself. I'm actually on your side of the world and about to explore the maze-like wonders of the London Underground. Fraser pushed a stack of papers away from him and straightened in his chair. Really? Why didn't you tell me? I can come to London. Elena sighed. I thought I could surprise you at the Doctor Who convention. I assumed you'd be there. Fraser blinked. He'd forgotten about that completely in all the estate fuss. Oh, of course. But it's not until next week, is it? There was the sound of a noisy crowd going past on Elena's end, and then her sound cut out for a moment. It came back in as Elena was saying, chaperoning Albie. Alice couldn't get leave, and I know he spent years overseas on his own during his PhD, but I just couldn't imagine him getting along sensibly by himself at London Pride. What? Fraser tried to fill in the start of the story in his head. Why is Albie going to London Pride? Elena tisked at him, and then some kind of squeaky door noise came down the line. Assumptions, Fraser. Do you want me to go on a doctor-style rant? No. Fraser juggled the phone and switched it to loudspeaker as James entered the room with a magnificently groomed Brodric and placed the cat in Fraser's arms. We're with Jen and Cassie, Elena admitted. Albie was being a bit third-wheely about it. Considering the Whovian convention, I figured I'd come too, and that would help. You can meet us in London if you like, although I'm not sure it'll be Brodric's scene. Fraser extracted Brodric's claws from his knee. James, would you accompany Brodric and I to London for the Pride Festival? James dusted something off the mantelpiece. Considering my role as Brodric's butler, sir, which is likely to be generally perceived as me being your butler, I'm not certain my presence in that particular context would be appropriate. There was laughter from the phone. Hi, James the butler, shouted a voice Fraser was pretty sure belonged to Elena's friend Jen. Fraser, sighed Elena, why are you calling me for help when you have a butler with you who presumably knows the estate business inside out? Fraser sulked for a moment. I don't have a butler. Brodric does. And it's Brodric's inheritance, Elena pointed out. James, please help Fraser with Brodric's maths. There was the ding of a shop bell, I have to go, Fraser. I've got to help Albie find a rainbow onesie. There was a chorus of voices saying, bye, Fraser, bye, Brodric the cat, bye, James the butler. And Elena hung up. Fraser eyed James out of the corner of his eye. He didn't like James being his butler by extension. When James worked for Great Uncle Charlie, he used to come out and play golf if there was nothing to do at the house. He didn't call Fraser Sir then, or bring him piles of paperwork. Fraser did not attempt to engage James's assistants with the paperwork, but instead picked the phone back up and dialed the second person in the world that he really trusted, a 96-year-old Australian woman named Betty, who was both his Instagram rival and his sort of adopted grandma. Betty answered with scuffling noises and, oh, blasted thing, and then came on video chat, wearing her false fangs and a rainbow feather boa. Betty was an unusual 96-year-old in that she was regularly involved in a live-action role-playing game in which she was a vampire. So Fraser was not surprised by her attire. What did surprise him was the fact that she appeared to be standing outside Charing Cross Station. Betty, he exclaimed, are you in London? Oh, hello, Fraser, dear. Yes, I am, in fact. There's a big LARPing convention, and it just happens to coincide with... Why is everyone coming to the UK without telling me? Fraser exploded. Whatever do you mean, Fraser? Betty asked, going off camera as she dug in her handbag for something. Then she looked up, smiled off to the right of camera and exclaimed, hello, Elena. Fancy meeting you on the other side of the world. This was followed by excited noises and introductions being made between the friends who were with Elena and the friends who were with Betty. Betty put her phone down on the seat part of her walking frame and forgot about Fraser, who was left looking up at the sky and the city buildings and listening to the chaos of multiple voices all talking excitedly at the same time. Fraser sighed, pouted, which nobody saw except Brodric, and hung up. James, he announced, I'm going to London. I've told the bees and everything else can wait. He resolutely swept all the papers onto the desk into a neat stack and pushed the stack aside. In London, everyone was talking at the top of their lungs to the person next to them in order to be heard over the voices of the hordes pouring out of the station behind them. Ella, who had not taken in any of the young newcomers' names, was standing off to one side with her back against the wall and her arms folded. She had a nasty feeling that this was London on a quiet day. The Pride event that Bryn wanted to attend on the weekend would doubtless be 10 times as loud and crowded. The competing voices of Ella's companions had muddled together into white noise, and right now she was listening to the faint woo, woo of some flirting pigeons on the station balcony. Presently, the group started moving in the direction of some shops, and Ella gladly followed them inside, away from the station announcements and other chattering crowds. Bryn automatically returned to her side and started filling her in. That's Elena, the young person Betty knows through the Scottish chap with the cat, she pointed. She's here with her friends, Jen and Cassie and Albie, and they're going to the Pride celebrations too. Isn't that a funny coincidence? Ella, however, was still not really taking this in because her eyes had alighted on something that made her furious. Christmas decorations and Halloween decorations in July. Look at that dreadful mess, she complained, glaring at the offending tinsel and fake skeletons. Why do they have to have everything at once all the time? Betty, overhearing, bustled over with her walker to chime in. Awful, isn't it? Blasted shops, always trying to bump the season for things earlier and earlier. Load of tosh Christmas stuff being out already. It's a load of poppycock having Halloween things out in July, let alone Christmas decorations, Ella spat. Young Elena, walking ahead of them, turned around, nodding vigorously. I agree. Things stop being special if you have them all year. She shook her head as Albie pulled down a chain of brightly coloured Christmas baubles and hung them around his neck like over-the-top jewellery. This is why I needed to come on this trip. Albie, we're not here for Christmas things. She tried to retrieve the baubles, but Albie made a face at her for being a spoilsport and ducked out of sight behind the next row of shelves. I don't know what you think, Ella continued, but I'm not really into the mixing of Pride and Mardi Gras either. Like, Mardi Gras has its own rich tradition and festival, and Pride deserves to be something new and separate from that too. I thought it was just a Sydney thing, but then Jen said there's a whole Mardi Gras style after party after the Pride parade this year. Ella wrinkled her nose. All that means to me is there'll be twice the noise. I'm only doing the whole thing at all because it's on Bryn's bucket list. Ella nodded adamantly. And twice the volume of clashing colours and all the kinds of food at once that smells weird and people interpreting it as a chance to get into Halloween costumes early. Bryn sidled past them in the direction of the clothes section. Since you three are obviously having an excellent time complaining together, I think I'll leave you to it and join Albie in being enthusiastic. She made her way towards a stand of hats and began looking inside each one at the sizing tags. Albie reappeared from behind some shelves, coat hangers holding 4 different sizes of rainbow onesie clutched in his hands. Elena, I don't understand these sizes. Elena sighed dramatically. She looked at Ella and Betty. To be continued. Ella's 89 at heart, Jen snorted, poking her head out of an aisle with a pair of heart-shaped glitter sunglasses on. Fitting right in with Betty's crew there. Excuse you, young lady, I'm only 81, Ella told her. Well, I'm 96 and I'm the longest surviving vampire character in later, Betty declared. Fitting in with me is cool. Elena stuck out her chest. Yeah. She hurried past and went to help Albie, rather than engaging in further discussion, though. Of Albie's 4 possible rainbow onesie options, one was labelled small, one 10, one 30, and one size fits all. Clearly, as always, come through. They seem to be approximately the same size, with the exception of the length of the sleeves and legs. Elena rolled her eyes. Aren't these the same brand? Why aren't they the same sizing system? She held them all up against Albie in turn and eventually gave up, telling him to go and try them on. Albie wandered off and promptly got distracted by some animal ear headbands. Meanwhile, Ella had decided that London might have its uses as a place to find worn trousers, and had selected what seemed to be 3 consecutive sizes. It was very clear that they were not the same size as their Australian size counterparts, and the tags listed a US, Europe, and UK size, none of which Ella could be sure would fit. She carried the stack of options into the dressing room, a teenage memory of a similar department store experience making her somewhat nervous. She had, at one time, been required to obtain black choir trousers, and the result of that fitting room adventure had been an unfortunate one. Ella had become stuck in a pair of jeggings when the handle part of the zipper broke off. But that wasn't likely to happen here, she told herself. After all, at 81, she wasn't likely to choose jeggings to try on. While Ella was doing this, Betty and Bryn had joined Jen and Cassie in trying to select suitably festive hats, and were having similar sizing issues. While some of the hats did seem to have a head circumference on the tag, the measurements were inconsistent in whether they were metric or imperial. Still, other hats simply claimed to be large or made the wild assertion of being adjustable, which, of course, any sensible clothes shopper knows to be an enormous fib. Back in Scotland, Fraser was midway through packing to travel to London when an almighty clap of thunder heralded the arrival of a fierce storm. Brodric, who had moments ago sat regally on a velvet footstool in his best tartan coat, shot across the room to cower under the drinks cabinet. "Don't worry, Brodric," Fraser told him, trying to sound reassuring and in command of the situation. "It's just the sky being loud." In answer, the old building around them creaked, and there was the sound of strong wind and something smashing on the ground outside. Fraser ignored these sounds with great determination. He continued trying to select outfits suitable for a spectacular Pride street festival from among his sensible coloured vests and tweed suits. The door opened and James appeared, wet-haired and holding a bucket. "Forgive the interruption, sir, but a roof tile has smashed the conservatory ceiling and the kitchens are flooding." Fraser drew himself up in what he hoped was a convincingly commanding manner. "Well, call someone else to see to it immediately." James inclined his head. "I have tried, sir. There are many such incidents occurring, it would seem. The earliest anyone can come to fix it is tomorrow." Fraser looked at Brodric, who was still under the drinks cabinet, puffed up like a cotton wool ball. "Put the old bathtub under the worst leak and abandon ship," he instructed. James shrugged and obliged. Back at the shops in London, onesies, hats, scarves, and various bright accessories had been obtained, and everyone was at the front of the shop waiting for Ella. Some minutes had passed, with Albie putting on every accessory in sight and parading up and down in mismatched seasonal attire on purpose to provoke Betty and Elena. Bryn, Jen, and Cassie were growing tired of this and half-heartedly engaging in a debate about when was an appropriate time to put up the Christmas decorations. "It's only a matter for debate if you view them as only being associated with Christmas," Jen stated. "We sometimes use the same things for winter solstice, don't we, Cass? I'd put tinsel up for birthdays if she'd let me." "Yes, but you wouldn't have a Christmas-themed birthday party or a Halloween Easter celebration," Elena whinged. "Christmas is a birthday party," Albie pointed out mischievously. "Yes, but most of the things we do for it are actually winter solstice traditions," Elena retorted. "Gotcha," Albie replied. "Christmas is already mixing two festivals together. So are most of our nationally recognised holidays." Elena and Betty glared. Bryn frowned. "Why is Ella not out here yet?" She looked at her phone. "Oh dear." She bustled off in the direction of the fitting rooms. "Why don't you ever check your phone?" Ella snapped the moment Bryn's shoes came into view below the fitting room door. "I was involved in a discussion," Bryn retorted. "Now, what on earth is going on in there?" "It's happening again," Ella wailed. "I'm stuck in the pants." Bryn snorted. "Don't say pants, Ella. People eavesdropping will think you mean knickers." "They said size 12. This is not a blasted size 12. "Well, why did you put them on if they clearly weren't going to fit you, nincompoop?" "I thought they were stretchy," Ella spat. "Excuse me," murmured a shop assistant, appearing at Bryn's elbow. "Are the trousers in question by any chance the Marks and Spencer's grey dress slacks?" Bryn shrugged. "Ella," she called loudly, "are the pants in which you're stuck Marks and Spencer dress slacks?" "Bryn," Ella hissed. Then more quietly, "Yes." "There's a button," the shop assistant informed her through the door, "at the hip." "Oh." There was some rustling. "Can you get me the size 10 in these?" On Saturday, the youngsters, as Betty insisted on referring to Elena and friends, had agreed to meet Ella, Bryn, and Betty at the Piccadilly Circus Underground station They planned to proceed from there alongside the parade route to the Trafalgar Square stage, where Bryn and Ella wished to see some of the Pride's Got Talent contestants performing. Betty, who had attended her LARPing convention the previous day at the Victoria Embankment Open Air Theatre, had familiarised herself somewhat with the Piccadilly line. She led the way into the underground station at Green Park with an air of confidence, attired in her fangs, purple fake feather boa, and a dress with a bit of every possible colour arranged on it in haphazard patterns. She had felt getting dressed that she did not want to accidentally associate herself with any particular Pride flag or group, but nor was she willing to appear drab next to anybody. As such, a bit of everything at once seemed like the best solution, in spite of her protestations the previous day on the subject. Her Instagram famous paper crane, Harry, was tucked into her pocket, ready to pose with the vibrant crowd. Betty hefted her walker across the much-mentioned gap between train and platform and led the way onto the first train that arrived. Bryn led Ella, who was wincing at the crackly loudspeaker announcements, along behind. Bryn had gone all in on the everything-at-once approach to clothing for both Pride Parade and Mardi Gras after party. She was wearing clown-style rainbow trousers, chunky platform boots, a waistcoat in the colours of the lesbian flag, a sequined masquerade mask, and a top hat in the official Mardi Gras purple, green and gold. Ella, in contrast, had put on her new grey Marks and Spencer slacks and sensible flats, with a pink blouse that complemented her bi-flag scarf and a very discreet pair of rainbow earrings. When the train began to move, Ella put on noise-cancelling headphones in defence against the repeated announcements, beeping doors and people with rumbling wheeled suitcases. Bryn gazed up at the map on the carriage wall and frowned as the intercom crackled off. "Betty, dear, didn't you say we were just going one stop on the Piccadilly line?" she asked. "That's right, nice and straightforward," Betty beamed. "Not like everything else today, huh?" Bryn ignored Betty's attempt to joke. "Betty, they just said this was the Jubilee line." Betty's fanged grin faded. "Oh dear, blasted complicated maze of a place. We'd better get out when it stops." Bryn swore a bit and poked at her phone screen. "Right, we need to get out at Bond Street, go on the Central line to Oxford Circus, and then Bakerloo line to Piccadilly." "I'm not going to remember all that," Betty warned her. "Me neither. You just remember Bond Street. I'll remember Central line and Oxford, and Ella can... Ella? Oh, blast it. I'll just check the map again at Oxford Circus." Meanwhile, at Waterloo Station, Jen, Cassie and Albie were trying to determine which tunnels and lifts led to the Northern line and which to the Jubilee line and the train. Jen and Cassie had conspired to dress in a fashion specifically designed to annoy Elena, and had added tinsel in their hair and skeleton earrings to their previously planned smart-looking black and rainbow attire. Albie had on the rainbow onesie he'd purchased, and it was very obvious that he had not, in fact, tried it on. He looked like he ought to break into a gymnastic routine at any moment. Elena had a black coat that she felt gave her excellent Doctor Who vibes, over grey skinny jeans and a white shirt with a subtle purple stripe in it. She was reading the complicated sign on the wall, while Albie tried to rearrange his onesie to stop giving him a wedgie, and Jen and Cassie tossed over each other's hair. "I think we need to go down in this lift and then turn right along the tunnel," Elena told them. When no one appeared to be listening, she added, "That should get us to the control room." "Elena," Albie retorted immediately, "Doctor Who convention is next week." He pressed the button to call the lift. "Yeah, are you going to come with me?" Elena replied. "Definitely," Albie chirped, bounding into the opening lift and pressing the down button immediately, so Jen and Cassie had to run inside. We need to follow the signs for the Bakerloo line, Elena told the others. Wait, said Jen, looking around as the lift doors opened. Can we get through this way? About an hour later, both groups had finally made what Elena suspected was about a 5-minute journey for a local. The street outside the station ran with a river of colour and sound, which Albie looked ready to dive into, and Ella looked ready to run away from. Betty set her walker up against the barricade that edged the road and began posing with Carrie the paper crane for selfies, showing her fangs and a disconcerting grin. Bryn's eyes alighted on a group of street performers with instruments a short distance away, and she drifted towards them. Jen and Cassie leaned on the barricade, basking in the festive glow, until suddenly Jen yelled, "Dog!" and they both charged off up the road to greet a puppy. Elena stood back a little with Ella, keeping the station wall at their backs. Well, if that's not everything at once, I don't know what is, she remarked. Ella didn't seem to register the comment, which Elena could understand. There were floats in the parade with their own speakers, blaring tunes that mingled in the spaces between them like muddy waters. There was a distant announcer talking on a loudspeaker, butting up against the announcements coming out of the underground station, and music from shops had their doors wide open, inviting the revelling crowd in. People were squealing and cheering and singing. A short way up the road, Bryn had pulled her violin out and was joining in with the music of the street performers she'd spotted. The puppy that Jen and Cassie had gone to meet was yapping happily. This isn't really the right place for you to be proud, is it? Elena said to Ella, taking the old lady's elbow. Just then, there was a shout of "Cat!" from the direction of the puppy that Jen and Cassie were admiring. Elena looked up and saw Brodric in a patchwork rainbow coat. Fur around the coat puffed up and an extremely displeased expression on his fluffy face. He was trailing his little red leash behind him. Elena let go of Ella's arm, crouched down, and scooped up the cat, taking care to keep a firm grip on all 4 taloned feet. Then she straightened up and deposited the cat into the arms of a shocked Ella. You can keep him calm, she directed, can't you? Ella shrugged, wide-eyed, and scratched Brodric's ears. The cat, equally shocked, seemed to accept this. Elena scanned the crowd for Fraser's red curly head. She didn't spot him until they were almost face to face, though, owing to the fact that his hair was covered with a glittery rainbow bowler hat. It was very much at odds with the kilt and navy tweed waistcoat that formed the rest of his attire, and Elena laughed as Fraser approached. Fraser was looking rather overwhelmed and wide-eyed. Have you seen Brodric? He asked her immediately. Elena smiled and stopped him by the shoulders, giving him a hug. Don't worry, he came to me. I've left him in the safe hands of my new friend Ella. Elena turned. They're getting along just... Ella? She looked around wildly. Where's she gone? Betty came bustling out of the crowd, also looking concerned. My fangs fell out, she puffed. They went up and down the street, and I can't see them anywhere. Elena frowned at her. Betty will replace your fangs. Right now we need to find Ella. She's vanished and she has Brodric. I'll get Bryn, dear. Betty pottered off towards the sound of Bryn's violin. Albie waddled up at this juncture, moving with caution. Elena, he murmured sheepishly in her ear, the one's split. Elena let out an exasperated groan. Well, of course it did, because you didn't check it was the right size, and it's far too small, isn't it? Size small fits me in Australia, Albie complained, and in the US it was far too big. Betty came tottering back with a now anxious Bryn in tow. I'll fix you, Albie, she soothed. I always have sewing things. At LARPing, people's bits are always falling off. The door of a nearby cafe opened, and Ella stood there, a purring Brodric nestled against her shoulder, and her noise-cancelling headphones firmly in place over her bun. "Are you looking for me?" she asked. "Yes," chorused the others. Ella grinned and pointed at her ear with her free hand. "I can't hear you." There was an enormous clap of thunder, and Fraser jumped. Everyone except Ella looked nervously at the sky. "Oh dear," Fraser fretted. "I think the storm has followed me from Scotland." When the unlikely crowd of friends arrived at the Mardi Gras after-party venue, hoping to get out of the rain and enjoy the feast, officials were running in and out with orange cones and buckets. "Caps come off the ventilation shaft and we've been flooded," a member of the orange-vested damage control team explained. The street where they all stood was by now running with water. Jen and Cassie were trying to share their rainbow umbrella with Betty, Brodric, and Ella, while Albie and Bryn held Bryn's waterproof violin case overhead. A rainbow fake feather boa washed past them down the overflowing gutter. Elena dipped her hand in the water and came up with a sheen of multicolored glitter, which she quickly hand sanitized away. The procession of bucket-wielding staff parted, and 4 feather-masked catering team members pushed their way out with trays loaded with piles of takeaway boxes. "Everything's free or we'll all be going to waste," one of them announced, dropping the tray onto a fold-out table and turning back inside for more. Albie, who'd been looking a bit morose and bedraggled, bounced forward with a crowd of fellow soaking wet revellers and began inspecting what was on offer. He returned a few moments later with 2 entire trayfuls of pancakes and a kilogram bag of pistachio nuts, struggling to keep hold of everything. He handed this load wordlessly to Elena, and before she could object, darted back in and returned with an entire watermelon. "What should we do?" Elena asked Betty. They looked around at the others. "Party at our accommodation," Jen suggested. Albie held out his dripping, soggy onesie arms. "Pyjama party at our accommodation." "Lead the way," laughed Ella, who seemed to infinitely prefer this scene to the earlier sunny one. On the way back to the underground station, Jen whispered something to Cassie, who ran over to Bryn and passed it on, and then nudged Albie and murmured something in his ear. They ducked into various shops as they passed and returned holding mysterious, bulging bags. When they arrived at the place where the younger contingent was staying, Cassie held her arms out in front of the door. "Ella and Elena and Betty have to close their eyes," she announced, as Albie, Jen, and Fraser squeezed through the door behind her, Brodric getting between their feet. Ella and Elena looked at each other. Betty went to bare her fangs, then remembered she didn't have them. She gave Cassie a resigned, gummy smile. There were scuffling and swearing sounds from inside the room. Cassie waited patiently for Elena, Ella, and Betty to do as they were told, and then led them one by one to the sofa, where she sat them down in a row. There was a bit more of a scuffle, and then Albie said, "Okay, open your eyes." They did. All of the enthusiastic group members' colourful clothes, plus flags, wreaths, and bunting they'd added, were hung up around the room, and their wearers were now attired in pyjamas and dressing gowns. But that was not all. A pop-up Christmas tree stood in the corner, adorned with candy canes. Tinsel ran along the table and tops of the windows. Pumpkins and fake skeletons hung up in the corners, and a pile of foil-wrapped Easter eggs sat on the table. Pancakes were piled high on plates alongside watermelon, gingerbread, mulled wine, and noodles. Little masks sat along the kitchen counter. Betty cackled with laughter. "It's wonderful," she declared. Ella and Elena looked at one another and glared determinedly. Bryn smiled and shook her head, then pulled her violin carefully from the wet case and began to play something that made Ella's frown melt away. Jen brought Elena a plate with a bit of everything and a fluffy dressing gown. Come on, Elena, enjoy a little bit of everything at once for once, she smiled, giving Elena a shove. Fraser, curled up in an armchair off to one side, had somehow procured stripy pyjamas and a blanket for Brodric, and seemed to be sipping a glass of whiskey. Elena peered at him, wondering if she'd fallen asleep at some point and this was all a strange dream. Elena, he mused, after a long pause filled with the quiet, contented sound of eating. You know that nice chap called Chad, who was mayor of somewhere in Australia? Elena raised an eyebrow. You mean Chad, the disreputable bloke who once tried to steal Brodric from you to get his hands on the Stuart golf links? Yes, that's the one. What about him? Elena set aside an Easter egg wrapper and checked the corners of her mouth for chocolate. Can you contact him? Fraser scratched Brodric under the chin. Why? I'd like to offer him the estate, Fraser replied, biting into a piece of gingerbread. Elena, who had been reaching towards the table for some noodles, fell out of her chair. When everyone had had enough food, there was, predictably, far too much left over. What are we going to do with all of this? Jen asked, surveying the table. When I have too much of something, I usually take it to someone else's social event and leave it behind. Betty, with an evil grin. Yes, Cassie mused. Unfortunately, this is the social event, but this isn't our house, and we're not allowed to leave it behind. Can we drop it off to a food bank? Yawned Bryn, putting her legs on Ella's lap. Not fresh pancakes, Ella pointed out. They'll be horrible by morning. She looked at her watch. Also, it appears to be 2 a.m. Do you think there's somewhere in London that we could get a fold-out table at 2 a.m? Albie wondered. Elena eyed him warily. What are you scheming? I was just thinking that we could lay it all out in front of the underground station. Anyone braving that labyrinth at this hour, or indeed anyone out there at this hour, needs supplies. So, with much grumbling and stumbling and fighting over the one umbrella, a delegation of the motley crew made their way, in their pyjamas and slippers, out onto the streets of London at 2:30 a.m. to set up a food station in front of Waterloo Station. Albie, determined to observe appropriate food safety, had acquired gloves and a hairnet, and donned pieces of the other's pride attire that were dry enough to add some warmth over his sleepwear. He paused midway through setting out sliced watermelon to wave his serving tongs in the air and bellowed at the darkened street, "Look at me! I am everything at once!" Jen laughed and kissed him on the top of his head. So you are, Albs. When they got back, Bryn was playing a vigorous jig and there was a disorganized kind of pyjama Kaylee dance going on in the space where the coffee table used to be. Elena was right in the thick of it, 3 different people's scarves tied around her waist, and Betty, on her walking frame, hanging on by linked arms in a very slow Kaylee swing. Presently, Ella, who'd been playing improvised percussion on the bottom of a wok, stood up and banged the wok against the kitchen counter. "Silence," she demanded. Everyone obediently fell quiet. Ella listened to their attempt at silence for a moment and then went into the kitchen to turn off an exhaust fan before returning to look at them. "As you all know by now," she said, "I do not enjoy everything at once situations. I will never much approve of Halloween and Christmas decorations up early or at the same time, or multiple festivals combined into one blasted mess of street chaos. However, I must reluctantly admit that you lot, at this particular instance of everything at once, have been fun. So, I have a proposal for you all. In the event this collection of people should ever again be in the same place at the same time, we will make this, the Everything at Once Pyjama Party, a traditional event, at which, on such rare occasions, I will engage in a little bit of everything at once with all of you. She looked around at them all. Bryn let out an excited whoop. Friends, we have achieved the impossible, she told them. Still, Ella asked, turning specifically to Elena and holding out a hand. Elena sighed. Albie will write us a pact, she warned. But she took Ella's hand all the same. 6 months later, on Betty's 97th birthday, Fraser and Brodric stepped off a plane in Australia, a shockwave of hot, dry air ruffling the cat's fur. That evening, Betty's nosy neighbours later discussed a very strange collection of people, food, and decorations having arrived at the house. Dreadful, they exclaimed. There was even an inflatable reindeer in January. Now they'll have to leave it up all year. Inside the house, mulled wine was being passed around, and Brodric was settled contentedly on Ella's shoulder. Ella was wearing a set of rainbow pyjamas with Easter bunnies and Father Christmases on them. Fraser leaned back in Betty's rocking chair, a plate of pancakes in his hand. By the way, Elena, he started, if you speak to Chad, could you make sure to remind him that he must tell the bees? Elena, who was busy hiding Easter eggs, straightened up. I'm sorry, he needs to do what? Meow, answered Brodric. Everything, translated the voice of James, not the butler, from the doorway. I should say everything. Fraser unfolded very rapidly from the rocking chair, and Elena thought Brodric was probably very glad he was sitting on Ella. Betty gave a sage nod in Brodric's direction. Yes, she said, everything. Everything at once.
Yeah. That's funny.
Who has Christmas decorations at this point in time? I feel like I might be committing a social misdemeanor of not having my Christmas decorations up when most people would.
Sarah, I go up tomorrow.
Charmaine's got hers. Camilla's got hers. We haven't got ours.
We've got a dog, that's why.
Yeah. We have to determine where to put the Christmas tree so it can't be God hat.
Oh.
Yes, this dog also likes to remove plants from their receptacles. Like, and it's got all over the yard little teacups with cactuses and various things in them. They've all been pulled out. The cups are elsewhere. So if we get a Christmas tree, I know exactly what's going to happen. There'll be a tree and there'll be a pot.
I don't think she'll be able to pick up a whole Christmas tree.
She might give it a go, though. That's the problem.
Yeah, she might try.
It
Doesn't have to be successful.
So, what would we like in January's Storytime story?
I quite like. I had a little experience a couple of nights ago where my car had a flat tire in a completely dark lane.
Oh.
And I was just standing there completely terrified. And this lovely couple just stopped and sorted it. So I quite like something about Good Samaritans and the idea of
that's a good idea.
somebody doing something for nothing. Lovely.
I think you said something about soccer.
Yeah.
Right, because of the World Cup?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
So it would have to be unexpected results.
Okay, yes, because
That's the thing.
Australia wins
Australia have
World
done a lot.
Cup.
better than expected, haven't they?
Yeah.
Are they still going on, or have they not? They're gone. Yeah.
Maybe something about at all costs going on that, because funny enough, the Argentina match last night was quite horrible. It was very, very physical, and I think it was because they just want to win.
Yeah.
And so you get to the point where you've lost the competition, and everything is at all costs. You've just got to get in, got to do it.
Yeah.
Can I add mini golf?
At all costs, I must win the mini golf.
Well, I want something about lost keys. Because stories I've heard about recently.
What lost items seem to come up a lot in a story time. I think we must be a bunch who lose all our things all the time.
What about when you think you've lost something and you like spend ages trying to find it, and then it's in like a really sensible place that you should look first up? I did that yesterday. I was coming home from that work party and it was really late, and I was like, because I'd left a bag at work, and I was like, I think I've left my house keys in the bag, and I was like, I was really worried that I would have to wake Ben up and be like, please let me in. And then on the train I realised they were in my laptop bag in a really sensible place, like hidden away so they couldn't fall out, and I was like, that was past Camilla being sensible. I just didn't think I'd be sensible.
No, you don't experience yourself, do you?
Yeah, and I was like, I was shocked myself at my old self.
Put it in a safe place that actually was a safe place, as opposed to like when the rest of us go, I've put this in a safe place, but you can never remember where that is because it's actually somewhere outlandish.
Exactly. And just because I couldn't remember where I'd put them, I was like, I've put them somewhere stupid probably. So I was looking in like weird parts of my bag and in my makeup bag and stuff like that, and then I was like, oh, they're in a sensible place.
Why is it you can never remember the very sensible place you put it? You never remember where the place is. You come up with 40 other sensible places.
That reminded you of something. So you tied a knot and it reminded you of where you put something. But actually, when you came to it, you just held the knot and you thought, what's this supposed to remind me of? It's supposed to remind me of something, but I don't remember what it's supposed to remind me of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sarah, you know what this one is. You should do something along the lines of the Bert and Ernie book, where they start with a thing where they've got something and it doesn't fit. So they empty the goldfish bowl and put it in the pan, put the goldfish in the pan so they can put the crayons in the goldfish bowl.
Yeah.
And when they want the pan, they've got to do something else. And it just like
chain reaction, repurposing.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah.
Dominoes.
Ooh, domino effects, yeah.
I was just thinking about when people just really like, it could be a celebrity or a politician, someone who's well known, but for whatever reason, they just really start liking them and get really interested in them and can relate everything to them, or they'll just like be like, oh, I just realized I walked past like the place where this person once had coffee and it makes them so happy. Like,
Yeah. Like fixation on some kind of public figure.
Yeah. I was thinking about it because so when the Australian team in soccer lost, I mean, sure, they were upset or whatever, but then they all just went and got photographs with the best player from the opposition team and like, oh my God, I met this guy from the opposition team who just picked up. But hey, look. And like in the pandemic, how people got really like attached to Dan Andrews and Nicola Spurrier and it's like, you know,
like meeting your hero.
But not necessarily actually even meeting them. You just like have these little things.
Yeah, like I'm drinking the same type of special tea that
they like.
Yeah.
I just think it's really
marketing companies made a fortune off the Beatles.
Yeah. But yeah, it'd be interesting to also who people are interested in is often surprising.
Yeah. What were you saying, Alison?
But basically, I think it's this thing of the fact that in something like the World Cup and lots of these places, you're all of a sudden you're playing against your hero.
Yeah.
Then it stops and you're not anymore. you're suddenly, they're still up on the pedestal, and you've just become yourself again. And it's quite a strange. I watched it last night. There was when the Argentinians won again last night, and there was a little lad who belonged to the other team, and he didn't want to be with his daddy. He wanted to go and say hello to the man who was really famous.
Yeah.
The other man was really famous. Really sweet.
Yeah, so that's a nice thing to sort of play around with the famous and the ordinary. Because
The
that's
famous and the ordinary. I like
the
that.
famous and the ordinary, because that kind of links with what Alison was saying before.
What about having a really normal interaction with a like well-known person? Like, I went to a conference once and I was going to miss this talk. It was really important. There was no one else there except my, a researcher that I knew, and this person. And I knew they were like the most famous autism researcher there, but I really needed to work out where the heck I was going, and I exhausted everything else. So I just went up and said, "Hello, excuse me, do you happen to know where such and such talk is going?" And the person next to me near died. I'm like, well, they're a human being. They're here for the same thing I am. Well, But yeah, it was just so funny, like the two very different responses. Like, he was probably relieved someone wasn't mobbing him, and I was just like, do you know what such and such is?
Yeah, that's lovely.
I'd like Grease the dog to be involved in the next story.
Grease. Okay.
Grease.
And I thought Betty would be wonderful in her down-to-earth approach to life, in meeting the famous.
Meeting someone famous.
Absolutely.
Well, and I can see her meeting someone famous and not knowing that they are famous as well.
I think she'd be wonderful.
I think she would too, because I think at 97,
you don't care.
As if they're famous. I'm 97, you know what I mean?
Yes, you wrote some songs. I'm
Yeah. We've both achieved so much.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining her meeting like a movie star from Lord of the Rings or something. And you're doing, oh, what do you do? Oh, yes, I act as an elf. Oh, I act as a vampire.
Yeah.
Albie's leotard onesie was brilliant, by the way.
Oh, yes, that's nice.
It made me laugh because a few years ago, I had this summer barbecue at work, and I got this like new lovely skirt, and it was like one of those, is it tulle? Where it's like netting, and it was really nice. And I got changed in the change rooms at work, and then caught myself on the door and ripped the back of the skirt. And a lady in the office was like, "I always carry a sewing kit," and like ran upstairs and like basically sewed me into this outfit.
Wow.
It took her like half an hour, and someone like held, because it was quite dark in there, held like a phone torch so she could do it, and someone else was like, because it was really warm, was like, had like a little fan to like try and cool her down. So there were like 3 people like sewing me in. Maybe something like that. Teamwork. Yeah, Good Samaritan. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice with the Good Samaritan idea.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Sort of instant repairs. And
yeah, everyone just kind of like went straight to their roles as well. People like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And
coordination.
It's great. I love that that's like an actual experience of having someone basically like Betty going, I always have.
Yes.
So let's have a look what date the January story will be. The 14th of January. At the same time.
Yeah.
So hope to see you all then. So bye to everybody. See you next time on January 14th.
yeah, thank you.